Good morning everybody, welcome back after Christmas. I say Christmas, it's now Boxing Day actually. Today is oil change day on the van. It's due for well, the book actually says it has to be serviced every 18,000, but I do it every 9,000 and I do it myself. So it's Boxing Day today, so I thought I wanted to actually do this yesterday, but I thought it might be a bit rude doing it yesterday with all the family and relatives around and stuff. So let's get cracking. So to secure the vehicle underneath, I'm using a pair of 3-ton axle stands, one this side here and one on the other side there, both on either end of the subframe. Back in my younger days, I didn't give a toss. I just jacked it up, went underneath, and you changed a gearbox and you didn't think anything of it. But as you get older, you start to worry a little bit more about your own safety. So a pair of axle stands is a really good investment. Now, I've serviced this van since day one when it came out the shop, and I've just serviced it from new. Now, it's now got I think just under 220,000 miles on the clock. Now, the book says that this needs to be serviced every 18,000 miles. Personally, I think that's tantamount to vehicle abuse, if I'm honest. I think leaving an engine for 18,000 miles running on the original oil, I think is abuse. So I change it every 9,000 on this engine. Now, when I change the oil, I'm using a product. I use an engine flush, so like this one here, so like STP engine flush, something like this. This is quite a controversial thing. Now, there's a lot of arguments. There's a lot of argument for it and against it. The theory behind engine flush is that it basically helps to remove deposits and contaminants from the inside of the engine. So when you put the fresh oil in, it basically gives it a fresh engine to go into. I've used this on every oil change from when I got the van from new, which is why I don't think it's an issue in this vehicle. But a lot of the controversy starts when you buy an old car that you don't know the history of it, you don't know who's done what to it. People then go and put this in the engine when they do an oil change, thinking they're doing good, and it'll unclog. What they say is it can unclog stuck deposits, etc., and then it will block an oil feed pipe, and then it will seize your engine up. Obviously, if you're buying an old vehicle that you don't know the parts of it, then I'd probably say don't use it. But I mean, I've used this on every oil change from when this came out the showroom, so I'm quite happy to use it. But if you're buying an older vehicle that you don't know the background or the history of it, I'd probably say steer clear of it, because you don't know. It is possible that it can do more harm than good, especially on a vehicle that you don't know its background. So, and before you put this in, check the oil level first to make sure you're not overfilling it by putting this in. So that's the engine on now. We're just going to leave that for about 15 minutes, let it idle. Ideally, you want to get the engine up to operating temperature before you add the engine flush. This is already at operating temperature because I've literally just driven it here. So we'll leave that for a quarter of an hour, let it do its thing, and then we'll drain the oil out. Right, that's been 15 minutes. So let's open the drain plug and drain this out. Okay, so I've cracked off this nut here. And another good tip is to wear vinyl gloves when you do this, because it makes the cleanup operation afterwards infinitely easier. And another good tip is take the filler cap off when you do your oil change, because that way you won't get that horrible glugging effect. So I'll leave that for another sort of 5-10 minutes, let it drain out, and we'll put this plug back in. Okay, the next tip when you're doing this is to change this copper washer as well. So these sump plug bolts will come with a copper washer like that. What will happen is if you leave this copper washer on and you try to reuse it, you'll inevitably, what will happen is you'll end up getting a small, slow oil leak. So always worth changing this sump plug washer over. I mean, don't forget, normally if you're in a garage and you've got like a 4-post ramp or something, this is a doddle, But even then, I don't mind doing it. I really quite enjoy doing this. I mean, I wouldn't like to do it every day, but be a little bit careful as well, because if the oil is really hot, this can be obviously quite uncomfortable to do. So you've got to be a little bit careful. Yeah, this is when you get the new one, you realise it's not the same as the old one, and you go, fuck. And that's the filter, and it just slots on like that. It just literally clicks on like that. That's it. And then you've got a rubber ring here, this gasket, which I'll replace with this one now. To put a fresh gasket on it, and that's it, it's ready to go back in. So I'll just clean this up with some blue roll and some brake cleaner. I've actually got some of the old oil on the filter, which isn't very good, but it'll do on this van. I should have changed my gloves when I put the filter on, but never mind. It's not the end of the world. This is one of the great things about having a tarpaulin down as well. If you do make a little bit of mess, you can just mop it up. So there's the hole for the new filter. So just slot that straight in. Now the way that I've always done this, when I'm tightening the back up, because these are plastic, so you have got to be careful. You can't go, you can't go Gangnam style on this. You've got to be a little bit careful. I just tighten them up like this, nice and gently. And then as soon as it stops like that, I just literally just go a little bit more, and that's it. I don't go any further than that. So all we'll do now is we'll clean that up with a bit of brake cleaner. And it just takes all the oily deposits back off the filter and just gives it a nice clean finish. So there you go, it's a couple of minutes and that's now nice and dry and oil free. Okay, so that's drained out now, so we'll pop the plug back in with our fresh copper washer on. So the way I do it, again, I just tighten it until it's hand tight, and I'll just go a little bit more, and that's it. I won't go any further than that. But you've got to remember, this is only this is only aluminium, so these won't take a huge amount of stress to strip the threads. So when you do put the sump plugs back in, be a little bit careful. Now, if you're changing engine oil, you've got to make sure you're using the correct grade of oil. Now, this van needs a 5-weight 30, which is this one here. I mean, there's a lot of people actually who don't listen to that, and they'll just shove a 1040 in or something. They'll go into the car parts, and they'll just order the cheapest one, whatever's on special. The way I look at it, when this engine was built, it was built to be used with a specific grade of oil. It was, it was designed that way for a reason. And if you use a different grade of oil, you might get away with it for a little bit, but it's, at some point it's going to have a long-term effect. So it's worth putting the correct grade of oil in, because, a 5-weight 30 is going to have a different viscosity to, say, a 1040. The other top tip, when you're pouring engine oil in like this, pour it in with the can on the side like I'm doing, because if you pour it in from the top, you get that glugging effect, and it really slows down. It can make a real mess of your engine if you get it wrong. When it starts glugging, it'll start glugging all over your engine. And obviously make sure you put your drain plug in before you do this step. I've done that before in haste. Like I say, the handbook says that this needs to be done every 18,000. I'm not convinced that if you put fresh oil in, I'm not convinced that oil will offer the same protective properties in 18,000 miles as it will after 9,000, in my opinion. I mean, there are a lot of people who change it even more than 9,000 miles. Some people will do sort of every 4,000 or 5,000. I do 9,000, and like I say, this engine, I've owned it from new and done this myself, and it's now on 220,000. And all I've done is just change the oil every 9,000 miles, and it's still running all right. So I must be doing something right as far as I'm concerned. When I used to live down in Devon, I had a guy who I knew, Ali Jane, who did some of my service work and stuff. Fucking good mechanic he was. God, he was good. Now, a lot of cars have got electronic oil gauges on. I mean, I'm actually not a lover of these plasticky. How the fuck can that give you an accurate measurement? I mean, look at it. But what was wrong with a good old-fashioned metal dipstick, What the fuck is that, really? Just wipe it clean, push it in, pull it out, take a measurement. Simple as that. That's on the top mark, so that's perfect. So now that that job is done, we'll put a new air filter in. So all it is 4 Torx bits. That lifts out the way, your oil filler cap. This lifts up, and then that's your old filter in there. That comes out. So that's our clean new one. So you can see the difference, and that's after 9,000 miles. So you can see, the difference in how much, how much work an air filter actually does. So we'll pop that in. Okay, so that's in. Fuck off pipe. And that's it, we just tighten those back up again. Make sure this is correctly seated on when you put the bolts back in, otherwise you'll get air seeping under the filter and it won't be doing its job. Okay, airflow sensor wire back on. Air filter done. Next job, fuel filter. Alright, so this here is the little fuel filter in question. Okay, so we take the fuel filter out, like so. Okay, so this is the new filter which we need to fit in. So what we'll do, So you just undo the top nut, that comes out. We'll just pop it to one side. So all we'll do, we'll take this off, sit it down on the blue roll, and your old filter literally, nice and gently, just lifts out. Now there is an argument that when you take the old fuel filter out and you put the new one in, you're not supposed to, you should theoretically throw that fuel away. However, I'm of the opinion that on the basis that fuel's £1.30 a litre, I'm not doing that, and it's bloody well staying in there. And you take your new filter and it just slots back in like that. I'll pop a new seal on actually while I'm here, and then that just goes straight back on top. So now our fuel filter's back in place, we've got to prime the filter. So all you've got to do this is you just open up your air vent there, press this in, tighten that back up and let go. And you just keep doing that until fuel appears out of this vent. And when fuel appears out the vent, it means there's no more air left in the filter. See, there you go. So that's all the fuel coming through now. So we can let go of that. I'll just clean that up with a bit of brake cleaner. So we'll take all this old paper out that I put in and start her up. Now it is worth mentioning that if you've put, if you change the fuel filter over, although the filter will be purged, you'll probably have air in the fuel pipes, so you might just have to crank your engine a little bit to get it to fire over. Come on, you fuck, start. Fuck, that was a close one. Now, different areas across the country have different rules regarding getting rid of your waste oil. Here in Devon, they're pretty good, and if you leave it out with your recycling, they'll take it away and they'll recycle it, because they class waste oil as recyclable, so they will take it away free of charge. Okay, so I'll leave that to drain out for 10 minutes, let it all drain in there. I'll come back to it in a bit, and that's basically it done. So I hope that's been sort of useful to you guys, so you can just see what I'm doing during the Christmas, or what I'm doing to survive Christmas, because if I'm not working I start getting itchy feet. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. I appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the new year. Have a good New Year's Eve, and we will touch base probably in the first week of January, I thought. See you later.